to just put them in the minutes and walk away and no feedback or anything by that kind of stuff. So if you have comments or questions about the reports that are very well done per council request, now's the time to bring it up.
I just want to say thank you to everyone because these are wonderful reports.
Yeah.
A lot of good information. So
I think they really help. I don't know the month to month. I think we talked about this once, but the October to September, you have September and October, and then you have prior year and current year. The monthly ones don't do as much for me if that's hard to pull, but if you have to pull them anyway, then but that's just me, my 2 cents on what they are. I think the yearly comparisons are super helpful, especially in the police and the building stuff. So that helps a lot.
The window into how busy you are, I will tell you that.
One of the things that I thought was impressive was on the Parks and Rec, how over 2024 versus 2023, the adults and seniors, there's so many more of them than there was the year before, even though the youth numbers was constant. So it's just interesting how the services are being used.
Just want to say thank you.
Yes.
Like I down the road. You.
Right, you're on a roll, guys. Good job. Okay. Public hearing is now open for the 2025 budget.
So here we have the highlights. So this is going to be a kind of a side by side of what we went over in our first meeting, and we'll see the changes here. So we followed council priorities of the staff requests. So these are again in order of your guys' priorities. With the code scope contract, we're able to split that between 2025 and 2026. So we were just able to split that. It helps a lot. Have that extra 125,000 for my ClearGov budget software. We're able to get 2 of the 3 softwares that I wanted. Transparency was the big one that's going to help for the public, for you guys, for me. And that one is it's budgeted in 20,000. So we're able to get that, as well as some more software that's going to help with forecasting. So I'm excited to try those a little bit more. Still working with ClearGov and going through that whole process. And then the Civic Plus software, the original number was for the entire suite to split to Civic Plus. But looks like it's just going to be Katie's software. That's a new website, things like that. And then there's other funds for the building software separately, 15,000. It's just going to be in a different spot. So here in the general fund, we were, again, this is the list of most of these are your guys' requested items. The bold print were in those council request items. And we were able to, in just out of these items, we were able to cut down $250,000 there. And these are capital expenses that I have listed. Our library fund, no change there. We're going to move forward with that HVAC replacement using REAP dollars. Park fund had took out the dog park amenities and the pool features and equipment. These are additional projects that Josh was wanting to start. And you have money later we list for matching funds for a grant. So if you were to get a grant for these, be able to use that. These were able to be budgeted this year. He still has those multi-use courts that has 300,000 from the city and then 100,000 from Lozier. It's 400,000 total over 4 years. street funds, we didn't make any changes there. Almost all of this is grant money. So we were able to go forward with those. Sewer projects, we didn't make any big changes on these. Again, these are capital projects. We did cut some of the smaller 1,000 here, 20,000 there projects. But not all of our big projects are really moving forward. So this is continued. Rob had asked for, originally cut $4 million out of this budget. We just didn't talk with Rob about his list of priorities. So we're leaving in the water main for the new jail, the well 6 drilling, and the well 5 rehab. And we can prioritize the well 5 and 6 pump house and the water main next year or the year after. For equipment rental fund, we'll be getting 3 additional leased vehicles. That's what we are assuming we will need. And then a paint striper. Again, this is using Rob's list of priorities. Paint striper is what we need the most. Forklift and sweeper were cut from this list. We don't have the funds in our equipment rental to be able to afford those right now. We have adjusted the equipment rental rates. So we are paying more into this fund so that we can hopefully get those have more money in that fund for the next year. Here's some other factors affecting the budget. September CPI was 1.7. That's normally what we use for the following year. Our CIAW insurance rate increase, we got that this week. It's 25%.
Ouch.
Charts quite a bit. So we'll be digging into that. I have some questions about a couple of the line items that we'll be working with them on, just so I can get a better understanding of why they're being raised. But that was a big dent that hurt. We also have implemented enterprise fleet management. That should help our maintenance go down. Newer vehicles, we won't be having as many in leased vehicles. We won't have having the maintenance on the older vehicles. Our medical insurance premium increased by 3.9%. There's the increase in minimum wage. That was 2.35%. And the increase in our equipment rental rates, that's us paying ourselves, was increased 20% to help offset those costs. What was going on is we were barely staying afloat, able to pay for the current vehicles we have, but a future vehicle we just can't afford because we didn't have the right rates. So we have to increase those rates so that we can afford the future vehicles. Here's the personnel. Adding that engineering grant writer, that was your guys' #1 priority. Adding code enforcement building inspector, also on that priority list. We're gonna get a part-time mapping and scanning position for our water and sewer lines so that we know where everything is essentially. And it's all GPS into the system. So we just have it all there on a computer so that when some of our guys are nearing retirement age, and the fear is that they leave and no one knows where things are. So we'll do that mapping and scanning. The part-time parks position, we don't have ones in parks right now. We added a new position last year in parks, so we're hoping that we can balance that out a little bit more. Hopefully we won't need one too badly. Otherwise we'll readjust next year. And if we really need one, look into it further next year. So here's some operations versus capital projects. 2025 is on the top, 2024 is on the bottom. So our operations is just over 17 million, and our capital projects is just under 26 million. 2025. Will all of those capital projects get completed? Most likely not. They're probably going to roll over to the next year. Capital projects in 2024 was 22 million, and a lot of that rolled over into this. So here we have the sheet that I showed you guys at the 11/6 meeting that had the imbalances between revenues and expenditures. And then our current revenues and expenditures, it is balanced now. And some of the big differences here, I did present those to you guys just because the numbers are small. So you can kind of see the things that can have people from the executive team coming and saying, oh no, I forgot about this. Can we add that into the budget? So if you see a couple that are raised, that's the case. We added a few more things. We took out a few things as well. What questions do you guys have?
Public hearing. So if there's anybody from the public that wishes to comment on this? Rob, I know you better. You're gonna have a lot of questions at the end of this.
First, I have to be able to do math myself.
So we have professionals. All right.
The part-time mapping position, is that something we're gonna use a consultant for? Is that a specialized thing, or we can train somebody to do?
Yeah, so we have the temp worker Mason Moore
Mhm.
that is currently working, and he was in his current temp position until December 31st. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll him over for about 6 months, we're thinking, and teach him how to do that.
I think that's a great idea.
With your expenditures increasing year over year, is income increasing as well?
It is a little bit. We have an increase in our sales tax, an increase in our property tax as well.
Thank you.
On one of the very first slides you showed, you don't have to go back necessarily, but you were talking about the code scope project, and it was at 250 and now it's at 125. Are we asking for less stuff, or do we just figure out it costs less?
No, so what we're able to do is we're able to essentially take the exact same thing and then pay them over 2 years.
Oh, instead of one. That's cool.
So the timing of the project will be like third quarter, first quarter.
Got it.
For this one.
Nice. That's creative. Good job.
And a big part of those capital expenditures that are out there, you got a water tank going in and you've got a huge amount of work being done out at the wastewater treatment plant. And those will, within the next year or so, will drop off, which will be a big plus for us.
Yes, and a lot of those projects are paid by reimbursable loans. So the water tank, that's a reimbursable loan, it's 85% reimbursable. But we still have to spend the money to then have the money be reimbursable and get it back.
Right.
So it's not all of our money, luckily, so our taxpayers aren't having to.
Right. So it still shows up as a pretty good chunk of change.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other comments from the public? All right, thank you. Public hearing is closed. Move on to ordinances and resolutions. This is the first reading of the ordinances. Want them to be moved on to a second reading, then we will make a motion on each one of those to move the ordinances on. First one is ordinance 24-13, the 2025 fee schedule.
Okay, counselors, mayor. So what we have in front of you guys is the fee schedule for 2025. So council philosophy in the past has been to make small incremental increases in the city's fees and change in charges on a yearly basis by the amount of CPI for the current year. Historically, we've used September CPI West BC. This year, that rate is 1.7%. All rates have been increased by 1.7%, with the exception of the water rates, sewer rates, and ERC rates. This is in order to cover the loans of the water reservoir pressure zone project and the sewer collection and water reclamation facility improvement project. Those rates will have to increase beyond the CPI, as we've discussed. After review of the ERC rates by the Parks Commission, structuring of the rates as well. What was happening with our current rates were not we're barely not covering our PUD bill, the ERC. So we were needing to make some changes there just so we'll continue to have the ERC in the future. That rate is 80% subsidized by the city. So went and looked over those, so those rates are in there as well. What we're looking at here is the 1.7% CPI to the general government services, and then a 3.7 increase to water fees and 7.1 increase to sewer fees. Staff recommends that we adopt ordinance 2413 amending EMC chapter 3.35 entitled fee schedule and charges for city service.
Question. In your document, you mentioned that interest, that the rate was 11% for 2023, and we're asking for another 7.9 for, okay, and I understand it's because of the projects that we've got. So my question then is, are we going to have some kind of stabilization once these projects are done? Because 18% increases is fairly significant.
Right, yeah. So we have millions of dollars in loans that we have to pay back. So what we've done is we did slowly increment of those dollar increases over the last 5 years. That was for the sewer rates. They did dollar increases. We needed an additional $7+ million. So we had done dollar increases for an $11 million, then you have an additional 7. So we're needing to do a little bit more for that as well. And then, yes, it should level out. However, if we have more projects, and we have to take out more loans, then I can't speak for 5 years in the future. In theory, it should level out.
Okay.
Because we don't have massive projects planned after these ones. I can't speak for 5 years though. If something breaks and we have to fix a $10 million water, have to figure that out with the loan or grants or whatever we do. Hopefully that's something that our grant writer can assist with.
So with the millions of dollars of loans that we have out there, do you have a guesstimate of what the payoff date is on those? Are we looking at 10 years, 15 years, 20
Years.
30?
They were anywhere from 20 to 24 years.
There's 2 different fees that I think I'd like to get reviewed in probably the 2025 year. I don't have any suggestions for right now. The one that I brought up last year was dog tags. That one is a fee that I think falls under the blanket of we're just going to do our CPI increase across the board. I think we've gotten a little out of whack with what the fee is there versus the standard. We do a one-time fee, which I think is preferable, but like by comparison, for Quincy Moses Lake is about a $10 annual tag that they do. We're upwards of $50 depending on your dog and its status. I think that is probably deterring some people, but it's also one of those things. There's obviously a culture of decreased compliance on that particular fee. So when I've looked at the numbers, doing back of the napkin math, we probably have around 10% compliance in town with people's dogs, and it doesn't add up to very much money. I think we should target we're either going for revenue or we're going for compliance. The current fee, I don't think really achieves either one. If I was going to suggest something, I think we should look at doing something like a simple $25, we don't care what kind of dog it is, fee, and be done with it and keep it simple for people. People see and spot on there on our fee schedule. It's going to cost them $50 or $60. They may not even bother. But I like that it's a one-time fee. I wouldn't change it to an annual fee. I think that's going to make it even less likely to be regularly complied with. But that's just one thought on that. The other one is the signage fee. We have a fairly complex signage code. It's around 16 pages last time I remember looking at it. It's one of those things I would like to have on the list of things that we review for simplification. in its current form. I know why we have a separate fee and a separate inspection and a separate review process for it, because there's a lot to comply with. But in my observation, that's another one where if you look around town, it's more and more people are going to window decals as opposed to traditional signs. I don't know that we want, but that's definitely what we're getting. And a lot of these things, when they get fully calculated and you all of a sudden get your contract, you're adding a markup and adding their own time for going to different meetings and separate things. This adds up to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, depending on the scale of what they're doing. And a lot of people are either foregoing the sign altogether, going for more simplified signs. In the event we do a review and simplify the code, I'd like to just see that get lumped under the standard building permit, but it depends on what we do.
Sorry, I have a question on the planning and zoning fees. We've talked a lot about, not necessarily just directly these, but we've talked a lot about making sure that we're in line with what we should be paying, what builders should be paying, what's typical. My question, I guess, is, are these in line with like neighboring communities? Have we ever looked at that? That might be a future thing as we go through the code scope too. But I'm just curious. I see that these are increased by the same amount as everything else is. And there's a couple added in here for, unplatted land and short-term vacation rentals and things like that. Are these competitive, too low, too high? How do you generally feel about them?
Last time we really looked at them and them was 2015, so it is time to start looking again. They were comparable at that point.
Okay. They need to look. That could be with our code scope thing too. Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Anybody else, any questions? The motion that was read very nice by Kristen to accept, to move ordinance 24-13 to the second reading.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Snap. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Ordinance 24-11, the budget that we just saw a whole bunch of. Numbers on the wall.
Mayor, councilors, we had our annual budget. And this is in line with that council retreat that we had on September 13th and 14th to discuss the goals and priorities for the past and the future. Our annual budget preparation follows the RCW's code cities. And what we are doing here is just making sure that we were in line, gave the worksheets to directors, and we submitted our request for the next year. I keep saying this year, I think in 2025 is this year. So for next year, and then we combined them all together, went through with your guys' list of priorities, took out the items that were not a priority, and then had to cut that down so that we balanced our budget. Our total proposed 2025 budget is still being refined. Stuff can change every day. However, the current estimate is just shy of $150 million. So this was our first presentation and first reading of the ordinance. Ordinance be moved on to the second reading.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Questions?
We had amended the ordinance slightly. So what we have in front of all the counselors is the revised ordinance, which is a little different than what was in the council packet, just so you'll be able to see how those numbers were actually increasing recently.
Okay. Did that prompt any questions? Cool. Thanks, Kristen. Need a motion to move ordinance 24-11, the 2025 budget to the second reading.
So move.
Thanks, Val. Okay,
Second.
Second.
thanks, Mike. Any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Ordinance 24-14, the creation of the EMC 9.42 trespass.
Good evening.
What? It's not Kristen?
The purpose of this one, it kind of goes hand in hand with the camping ordinance. I just figure it's putting two ordinances at one time, so they're offset, but this one is essentially meant to offset and add a little more enforcement to the camping ordinance. I know Councilor Lehman's, at the last meeting, asked if there was a venue in the camping ordinance to move forward towards misdemeanor or criminal offense. And essentially this trespass ordinance gives the means to do that. So in the in the camping ordinance, there isn't a means to move it into the criminal realm. But through this ordinance, that would be possible. We run into numerous instances and it seems to increase of repeat offenders and such on public property, and we don't have legal authority to trespass them from the city property. You know, at times we usually negotiate and get people to move, but we don't necessarily have a legal standing to do that. So this facilitates that for you know, dangerous behavior, illegal behavior, and unreasonably disruptive people in our parks, in our public facilities, such like that. So obviously staff is supporting the we adopt the ordinance, and what we're looking for today is a motion to move ordinance 2414 on for a second reading.
All right.
Any questions?
Yeah, I had one. The ordinance says it does not apply to public streets and sidewalks. Is there a reason for that?
I believe because those sections are already covered under code.
So it kind of overlaps with the camping and family handling and lewd behavior laws or something like that, but.
Correct. And I believe, Annie, I'm gonna step in.
Yeah, there-
On the public rights of way, the roadways, I believe, we're limited on trespassing people for a roadway. But
There are rules of the road, of course, that would apply to conduct in those areas. But also like a sidewalk is considered a traditional forum for First Amendment activities. So you don't want to regulate those as much as you would, you know, the city hall area or other public property.
If I opt to take a nap on the sidewalk, is that covered somewhere in the code or is that?
As long as you're not obstructing pedestrian or vehicular traffic, that's actually fine. It's if you are obstructing traffic, that's when it becomes an issue. And like the chief said, those are already covered by existing laws.
Okay. Good to know.
Is there I guess my question is more around like, it's public property, so how much can you really limit? Like what's left? I mean, you have like closed buildings, people aren't necessarily in those, that'd be a whole different thing. But there's the city streets and we have the parks thing already, so I'm trying to figure out like, what would this be for?
It'd be other city property. So it's not, you know, probably a huge category, but like the city hall, campus, you know, the public works shop, the fire station, anywhere where it's open to the public. I mean, of course, there's staff restricted areas, which they just can't be anyway. But it's just, there's that gap of, you know, if it's not the street, the sidewalk, it's not covered by your parks ordinance, this would apply. And so it's just trying to make sure every property within city control is covered with these options for tools.
All right. Any other questions? Need a motion to move ordinance 24-14, the EMC 9.42 to the second reading.
Moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second?
Thanks, Matt. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Well, now we move to the second reading of ordinances. These are the serious ones that this is the final reading, correct? You pass this, it becomes part of the budget. Ordinance 24-10, the ad valorem tax for the 25 budget. We missed you.
Good. Counselors and mayor, So we have our ad valorem tax for 2025. This, part of the budget process, council is required to hold a public hearing on the revenues projected to be raised by the ad valorem taxes to be levied on real and personal property within its corporate limits for the upcoming year. We had this meeting last council meeting. City is allowed to, by law, to increase the revenues received by the ad valorem taxes by 1% from the previous year's actual levy amount. This 1% is exclusive of additional revenues resulting from construction and annexation. For 2025, this 1% amounts to $14,438, which would be used to help us maintain our level of service in parks, library, streets, and the cemetery as a result of additional costs brought by the increased cost of living. The staff recommendation is that you guys vote to adopt ordinance 2410, fixing the amount of revenues to be raised by the ad valorem taxes for the budget year 2025.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Questions from council? Need a motion to accept ordinance 24-10, the ad valorem tax.
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Second. Thanks, Val. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Ordinance 24-12, the creation of the EMC chapter 9.38 camping.
Excellent. Good evening. So, back to the camping ordinance. I believe, at the last meeting, the question was, how does it move to, possibility of a criminal offense? Last ordinance kind of filled that question. Yes, if council has any other questions that you could address with the camping ordinance.
All right.
And staff recommends motion to adopt ordinance 2412, creating chapter 9.38 camping to the municipal code.
Questions from council?
No, I think it's a great ordinance. I really appreciate this getting brought to us. I think other cities we've seen haven't done enough to protect their public spaces. I know there's always that statement of how can someone trespass on public property, but public property is for particular purposes. I can't have a birthday party in the chief's office as much as I'd like to. He seems like he has a nice office there. That's not what that was for. Public spaces need to be protected from stated purpose.
Any other questions? Motion to accept ordinance 24-12 to chapter 9.38 camping.
So moved.
Thanks,
Second.
Mike. Thanks, Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. We have a proclamation supporting the Wreaths Across America program that I'd like to read and get into the minutes. Whereas the Civil Air Patrol and Auxiliary of the United States Air Force organizes the Wreaths Across America program to honor and remember the sacrifices of our nation's veterans by laying wreaths on their graves during the holiday season. And whereas the mission of Wreaths Across America to remember the fallen, honor those who serve, and teach the value of freedom, reflects the shared values of the city of Ephrata and its commitments to honoring and respecting the men and women who have served our country in the United States Armed Forces. And whereas the Wreaths Across America ceremony to be held December 14th, 2024 at 10 a.m. at the Ephrata Cemetery will bring our community together to pay tribute to veterans who have sacrificed to protect our freedom and ensure our nation's safety. And whereas the city of Ephrata recognizes the importance of supporting the programs like Wreaths Across America, which promote patriotism, community engagement, and a greater understanding of the service and sacrifices made by our veterans. And whereas the Ephrata citizens are encouraged to participate in the wreath laying ceremony and to join in honoring those who have dedicated their lives to serving our country. Therefore, the mayor of Ephrata do hereby proclaim December 14th, 2024 as Wreaths Across America Day in the city of Ephrata, urges all citizens to join the Civil Air Patrol and our community at the Ephrata Cemetery to honor our veterans and reflect upon their contributions to our country. Therefore, I witness that I hereunto set my hand at the cause seal of the city to be affixed this 20th day of November 2024. Need a motion to accept the proclamation?
Motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Thank you, everybody. We're now going to move into executive session where we're going to discuss real estate site and acquisition. We will probably be gone for about what, 20 minutes maybe? You want more?
Say 30.
All right. Just trying to move it along. Great. So we'll be back in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Somebody else want to sign these? Suppose not here.
Hey, Ethan.
A meeting at 12 o'clock for dinner. What are you doing?